believe I am within reasonable place to suggest if you are available and would like to help the choir, they would gladly receive you. You're running up close now, so if you want to get in, I would say get here quick. I said 3 weeks. Wow, it's flying up on us. So, we continue our study this morning in the story. We're to chapter 9, the story of Ruth. Have you ever had one of those trips where you started out and you thought you knew where you were going? You were going to go on a short vacation or a short getaway, and all of a sudden things start going haywire, and it gets twisted around, and you keep making several twists and turns, and eventually, after you've gone several different places, you find yourself back where you started. And you go, that was interesting. But when you get home, you think, oh, it's so great to be back home. It's so good to be back where I belong. A casual reading of the book of Ruth makes it kind of look like that's what happens. That she leaves and she has some things that happen, and then eventually she gets back. But really, there's so much more to this story. And in fact, we could spend weeks dissecting this story. It's so full of relevant issues for us. But it is really more about Ruth and Boaz, her kinsman redeemer, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. We're going to talk about that journey to that place and what it looks like, and what it looks like in modern days as well as in that day. And we began in the book of Ruth in your story Bible. It's chapter 9 in your regular Bible. In the book of Ruth, the first chapter, there's a man by the name of Elimelech. And it's in the time of Judges, so we know that there is this pattern we talked about last week of the children of Israel kind of waffling. And when there's a judge, they follow the judge and they honor God. And then once that judge dies or is gone, they kind of go back their own way. And they're in that season of having gone back their own way and rejected God and not followed God, not kept the Levitical law that deals with how you care for your crops and your field and your poor and everyone in the community. And so God removes his providential care. He allows the natural consequences of their actions to be manifold. And now they find themselves in famine. And they find themselves in this difficult place as in this little town, this little sleepy town of Bethlehem. They are wrestling through hard times. And in that setting, Elimelech arrives, and he is a man who marries a woman by the name of Naomi. And the name Naomi means pleasant. And we pick it up here. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judea, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. Now notice it says for a while. Have you ever had one of those use that phrase? How long will you be? Oh, I'll be a while. Alright, so we leave for a while. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraimites from Bethlehem of Judah. They went to Moab and lived there. While Elimelech, Noah's husband, died, and she was left, I hear that now, and she was left with their 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons, or without her 2 sons for her husband. So we have this story of a lady who goes with her husband to a foreign country. Now let me start right there before we go any further. They're living in Bethlehem, God's kingdom. They're living in this town that God has established for them. And hard times come. And their solution to dealing with the hard times, instead of working through it, instead of seeking God, instead of asking God for direction, is to run away. Let's go somewhere else. The grass is greener over in Moab. And part of the problem is in Moab, we do not have the one true God, Jehovah. We have multiple gods, including a god by the name of Chemosh, which was the most prominent god in Moab. Chemosh was a god that part of the worship of Chemosh involved human sacrifice. And so we leave our convictions, we leave our God, we leave our family, and we go to what we think is going to fix our problems because there is an immediate solution, at least in our mind, an easy solution to our problems. Let me say this before we get too deep into this story. Running from God, running from your consequences, running from tough situations is rarely the answer. It does not fix what's wrong. You can change jobs, but the problem will follow you. You can move to a new community, but the issues will still be there. Sometimes the right thing, the smart thing, is to stop and say, okay, God, what is it you have for me? What is it you want to do in my life? And how do I deal with this? Their solution was to run away. And in running away and compromising their convictions, they suddenly find themselves in a very difficult spot. And that's where today's story begins. But let's start with a word of prayer. Father God, I pray this morning that you lead us, that you speak to us, and that you convict us. And Lord, where there's truth for us, help us to see it, help us to be honest and accept it, and help us to allow you to use it to set us free. Guide and direct us, Lord, according to your will and according to your purpose. In Christ's name, amen. So we've run away from God. We've run away from God's people. We've run away from where we're being supposed to be. God's given us this land. He's given us this place. And the truth is, it is our choices that have brought us here. And now life has kind of turned south, and it's time to head home. We hear that the famine is over. So I'm going to go back, and as I get back, we have this interesting exchange. After all this journey, 10 years, a while ended up being 10 years. And I head back to Bethlehem, and when Naomi arrives, the women come up, and they're shocked to see her. And they're surprised, and I believe probably happy to see her, but also probably wondering where her family is. And when she arrives, they come out to greet her and call her by name, Naomi, which means pleasant. Her response to that is this: "Don't call me Naomi," she said. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." Very bitter. The name, or the name Mara, literally means bitter. Bitter. Now, instantly, we all have questions for David and Lori, don't we? Okay.
So does Mary, for that matter.
That's true. That's true. Good point.
Mommy says that bitter.
So, she says, "Don't call me pleasant. Call me bitter." And let me say this. If you haven't had a bitter time in your life yet, you will. But I would look around this room and I would say the majority of you have already had that moment where you would say, "My life is bitter." You know, we use this phrase, when things go terribly wrong, when things don't go as the plan, we'll say it this way. We don't say, "Call me bitter." We'll say, "That's a bitter pill to swallow." What do we mean by that? It's a difficult thing to go through. It's a hard thing to endure. But I want you to notice one thing in what she says. And we're going to talk about it for just a second. She says, "Because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." Let me say this. All of us are going to have our seasons of brokenness. All of us are going to go through our times of hardship and bitterness. But the question is, when we do it, why? Do we always want to say, "God did it"? It's God that's making me bitter. It's God that made my life hard. It's God that made things difficult. It wasn't God that told Elimelech to go to Moab. It wasn't God who told his sons to marry Moabite women. It wasn't God who caused the famine. choices. Some of her choices were hers. She was the one who chose to marry Elimelech. And he was the one who chose to run from God. Yet she wants to blame God. It reminds me of when my kids were very little. And we lived in a parsonage in southern Ohio, in a little town called Amesville. And we had a nice big wood burner there in the basement. And I would build that thing up nice and hot in the wintertime, and it would get warm. And I told my oldest son Isaac a story when he was little about having a magic finger and making it snow. Whenever it would get cold, we'd begin to have this conversation about, should you use your finger, you're going to make snow. And what I would do is, when I would see the forecast called for snowfall that night, I'd say, yeah, try it out, see if it works. And he would go out and he'd do this, and then the next morning it would snow. And they'd be like, oh, it's so cool, he can make it snow. Well, my youngest son, Michael, was a little jealous. And so one day we're downstairs in the basement, we're playing around, and I've got a nice fire going in the wood burner, and Isaac said something about his snow finger, and I talked about it. And then Michael says, I've got a magic finger. I can touch the wood burner and it won't hurt me. And I said, oh, son, no. Do not touch the wood burner. Whatever you do, don't touch the wood burner. Okay, Dad. All right. So I played with him for a few more minutes. I get ready to go upstairs. I get about halfway up the stairs, and here's what I hear. I do have a magic finger. I can touch the wood burner. And I come back down the stairs. Michael, listen, man, I love you, buddy. And there's a lot of things about you that are cool and magical, but you can't touch the wood burner. Trust me. It will hurt you. Okay, Dad. Michael? You're not going to touch it, right? No, I'm not going to touch it, Dad. Okay. Start up the stairs, get almost to the top, and this low whisper I hear, I do have a magic finger. I come bailing right back down the stairs. I said, son, please. I took him over and I put his hand as close to it as I could. I said, do you feel that? If you touch that, it's going to hurt really, really bad. Please, do not touch the wood burner. Do you understand? I understand. Promise, Dad. You won't. I promise I won't touch the wood burner, Dad. I said, okay. And I walked up the stairs and I looked at Liv and I said, get some ice and a washcloth. She said, why? And about that time, he comes running up the stairs, and finger just throbbing, and looks me dead in the eye when I pick him up and we begin to put the ice on his hand, and he looks me dead in the eye, and this is what he said, I'll never forget. Why'd you make me do that? What? Why did I begged you not to do that. But in his mind, why did I do it? And we laugh about that, but how many times when we reap the harvest of our choices, when the consequences of the life that we're living, and not just ours, and here's a hard truth. My consequences don't just affect me, they affect those around me. And the people who live around me, their consequences affect me as well. But when life goes south because of my choice and the choice of others around us, why do I say God did it? God didn't do it. That's not the God that I serve. That's not the God that I know. He is not a mean, vengeful God that is constantly looking to get even. He is a compassionate, loving God. In Matthew chapter 11, my God says, if you're burdened, if you're heavy laden, come to me. He says, I'm not the cause, I'm the solution. And if things are wrong in your life, instead of blaming me, why don't you turn to me? But here Naomi says, because she's lost her husband, because she's lost her sons, because life isn't gone the way she wanted it to go, she says, God has made me bitter. And I would say, God has allowed your consequences to bring you to a bitter place. But my question is it possible to be pleasant in the midst of a bitter season? Is it possible to endure hardship and yet show that you trust God, show that you believe in God, and that God will sustain you? Because I believe that's the moment we give the most glory to God, when we endure bitter seasons and yet demonstrate love and devotion to our God. And so she goes through this difficult time. And part of this journey, we're going to back up now just a little bit. Part of this journey, there's a tough decision. She's got two daughter-in-laws. Orpah, not to be confused confused with Oprah and Ruth. Now you laugh. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but I read this week that Oprah's mother said originally she wanted to name her Orpha after that character, because she wanted her to have a biblical name, but they misspelled it on the birth certificate. Okay, I don't know if that's true or not. I have no idea what that has to do with my sermon. I just thought it was an interesting fact. So she has these two daughter-in-laws, and she says to them, listen, you have a choice here, and the right choice is for you to go home. I'm going back to my family. I'm going back to what I know, but here's what I'm going back to. I'm going back to hard labor. I'm going back to trying to survive, because my best hope is that a family member will show me compassion, but more than likely, I'll be a beggar or I'll sell myself in servitude to someone to survive. Why don't you go back to your dad's? Because in your father's home, you can find compassion and kindness. Go on back to your dad. And Orpha, we're told, says, see you later. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's a problem. You know, she went back to what she knew. But Ruth, for some reason, she weighs these two options. I can go home to Dad and maybe I'll find another man, or maybe there'll be other provisions. Or I can go with her and I can help her and I can try to make sure that she survives and that I survive. And I do believe there was a close relationship between the two, but I don't believe that's what motivated her to go. She wrestled with this, and it really came down for her to one topic. And I think it's something that we don't understand how she got there, but she's there. Let's go back to Ruth chapter 1, verses 15 and 17, and we read these words. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and to her gods. And that's little gods and plural. Remember I said Moab was a polytheist culture. She says she's going back to what she knows. Go with her to what she knows. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you and turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. What a beautiful, beautiful statement of covenant and conviction. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God. And there she uses the word Elohim. That was the God of the Jews. That wasn't just any God. That wasn't some God. That's your God, Elohim. Your God, Elohim, will be my God, Elohim. May the Lord, Adonai, deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you from me. Here's what I believe Ruth is saying. You serve the one true God. I know that. And we've heard that before, haven't we? If we go back a couple of weeks, remember Rahab says, your God is the one true God. I know that. And I know that He's triumphant. I believe Ruth says, your God's the one true God, and you serve Him, so where you go, I'll go. I'll follow your lead. But more importantly, I trust in your God. Now, just real quickly, let me ask you this. Are there people in and around your life that would say, your God, I have seen the way you live, your God is the one true God, I'll go where you go because you're going to lead me to your God? Is your life a testament to the power and the reality and the truth of the one true God? Can He be seen in how you live? I believe something in Naomi's life convinced Ruth she served the one true God. And so she makes that choice. And that choice isn't immediate in terms of followed up with blessing. We have this idea, and it's twisted. It comes from a lot of some may be well-intended and some self-serving religious zealots that will say, oh, the moment you serve God, everything in your life is going to get better. God wants you to be wealthy and happy and just on top of the world. And sometimes following God begins with a season of difficult growth. And Ruth ends up in an attempt to provide for her family, for Naomi and herself. She goes out and she gleans the fields. Now, understand, under the Levitical law, one of the things that God does is provide for the poor. And the way He provides for the poor, in Leviticus chapter 23, God says, listen, when you harvest your fields, leave the edges, leave the corners. And let the poor in your community come out, and they'll walk through the field, and they'll glean what you don't get you something for those who are less fortunate. You meet their needs. Okay? So when she comes back, she finds a man by the name of Boaz who has a large field, or finds out about him, and she goes because the word's probably gotten out, here's a field you can glean. And she goes and she begins to walk the edge of that field, and she begins to collect the remnants of the harvest that are missed. And the Bible indicates that she must have worked very hard, because the foreman of that field notices her. And I love this the way the Bible says this. It says, it just so happened. It's happenstance. It just so happened that Boaz, the owner of the field, shows up. And he looks, and knowing most everyone in the community, he notices there's a woman out there he doesn't recognize. And he says, who's that? And his foreman says, that's Ruth, the daughter-in-law of Naomi. She's been here all day. She's worked hard all day. She just took a short break. And then he, again, reminds him, you remember Naomi, she's a relative of yours. She went to Moab with her husband. He's dead. And Ruth stayed with her to help take care of her. And so Boaz then decides, I'm going to show kindness and compassion to Ruth. And he provides her food. He instructs his harvesters, make sure you leave things for her. Don't clean everything. He says, make sure you take care of her in this act of compassion, to the point that Ruth's almost confused. And she says, why would you do that for me? And he said, because I've heard what you did for Naomi. And I thought, what a great moment for us. How God demonstrates that how we treat others affects how others see us and see God. She shows compassion to Naomi, so he shows compassion to her. So Boaz provides for her, and that night when she goes home, instead of a small jar of grain, instead of a quart maybe, she takes about 2/3 of a bushel. That's a lot of grain to glean. And she comes in and she says, look, Naomi, I've got food. And not just a little bit, but a lot. And Naomi says, wow. Where did you get this? Where did you glean today? And she says, I gleaned at the field of a man named Boaz. And Naomi's her eyes light up. Boaz? He's a relative. And see, she understands the Levitical law, and there's some really cool things that are now going on in her mind. You see, under the Levitical law, God provides two things. Number one, he provides what's called the Levitite husband. If a woman has a baby, and I'm going to say this, she's not a baby, but if a woman is, I'm going to say this, ladies, this may seem a little creepy to you. And guys, this may not be the most exciting thing you've ever heard, but just hear me out. It's in my law, it's in Levitical law. If a woman gets married and her husband dies before she has a son, his brother has to marry her. Okay? And has to give her a son. And when that son is old enough to provide for his mom, then his brother can choose to either keep her as a wife or let that son provide. And then that son and all the land that was his dad's stays in the family name. Okay? Which means if you have a sister-in-law and she's married to your brother and your brother dies, you get a second, third, or fourth wife, depending on where you are in that culture. Okay? But he had to be a relative. It began that he had to be a brother. And then it had to be a close relative. That was to guarantee that the family name would be preserved. The other thing was, all the land that family owned, if a man died without having a son, the land could be left to his daughters. But if his daughters had no sons who could carry on the family name, it would be held in abeyance until a close relative would redeem the land, pay all the debt with it, pay all the expense with it. Okay? And then it would become, again, the family name for that land. All right? So she's in this field, she's gleaned, and it's for this man named Boaz, and Ruth goes, he's a relative. He could redeem us. Or redeem our things. All right? So she says, here's what you need to do. I'm going to give you a permanent solution to this temporary problem. Tonight, I want you to go, and when he lays down, I want you to go lay down at his feet and then cover his feet. That sounds like kind of an odd thing to do, doesn't it? Sounds bizarre. But see, when the men would do this harvest, they would stack the grains in bags in a big circle, and then the men would celebrate a little bit that the harvest was over, and then they would lay down, and they would lay their head on top of the grain and their feet sticking out, kind of looked like the spokes of a wheel. And they would sleep there to make sure that the grain wasn't stolen or lost, or any damage would come to it. So Ruth goes in, and she decides she's going to take her mother-in-law's advice. And although it seems like an easy thing to do, understand this is a humbling moment for her. She has to choose, am I willing to submit myself to someone else's authority? And in Ruth chapter 3, it says, when Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quickly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, someone startled the man, and he turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are my guardian redeemer, or the guardian redeemer of our family. Now, that guardian redeemer is translated also kinsman redeemer. You are that close family member who can redeem us. And here's the thing I love about this, is that phrase she uses, spread the corner of your garment over me. She literally says, cover me up. Cover me. Shield me. You know the phrase we've heard a few times, in the shelter of his wings? It's the same word picture in the Hebrew. Shelter me. Take me in. Cover me. Provide for me. And here you have this story of a woman who has been on this tough journey, and her life's been in a bitter place. And her decision, her first decision, is to trust in the one true God. Her second decision is to go to the feet of her kinsman redeemer, to humble herself and say, I know I can't do this. Will you cover me? Will you provide for me? And so now Boaz has this decision. Will I become her kinsman redeemer? But just so you'll know, there are certain things that had to happen to be the kinsman redeemer. Number one, you must be near of kin. Well, he is. He's family, but he's not the closest. Number two, you must be willing and able to redeem. And here's the thing. He goes to the city gates because there is a relative that's closer. And he says, have you heard Naomi's back? And she has her daughter-in-law. And then all of a sudden, the wheels are turning. Hey, wait a minute. Elimelech had some land, and there's some things here. And he says, well, you know, I think I'll redeem her. And he said, well, now remember, there's Naomi, there's the daughter-in-law Ruth, and there's some debts on land. He reminds him of what it's going to cost. And it wasn't going to be cheap, and it wasn't going to come without a price. And the man goes, never mind. I can't do that. I can't pay this price. I can't, it'll destroy me. Just never mind, I don't want her. And then Boaz says, then I'll do it. Because you see, the other thing is, it wasn't complete until the entire price was paid. You had to pay any back taxes. You had to pay the previous year's tithes on that land. You had to pay any debts that the women owed. You had to cover every expense. And it was usually quite expensive to redeem them. And although this closer relative says, no, I won't do it, Boaz says, I will. I'll pay the entire price. You know, a redeemer has to be willing to accept everything that comes with the redeemed. The past debt, the problems, the mistakes, the failures. And here's one of the things. I think sometimes when we come to Jesus and we come to the foot of the cross and we say, cover me in your blood, redeem me from my selfish ways, we think God wants only what's good about us, only the best part of us. We say, Lord, take what's good in me and make it better. But God says, no, to redeem you, I must take take what was broken in you. I must take the bitter part of you. I must take the debt that you owe. I must take everything that's wrong in your life, and I must take it and pay for it so that I can redeem you. Do you understand? God doesn't call you to come into His presence so that He can take your goodness, but your bitterness and your brokenness and what's wrong in your life. God says, I want. And I think sometimes one of the things we do in the church, and a huge failure, is we think the idea is that we should hide what is broken and present what looks good. And God says, you got it backwards. I want what's broken so that I can make it good. Do you remember, some of you who are familiar with the Scriptures, remember when Jesus is meeting with His disciples and He begins that final Passover before the betrayal. And He starts with this act of servitude. He ties a towel around His waist, He takes a basin of water, and He begins to wash their feet. Do you remember that? Okay, and He comes to Peter, and what does Peter say? No, you will never wash my feet. Why? Because my feet are dirty and soiled with the world. Don't touch my feet. And Jesus says something amazing. He says, if I can't wash your feet, I have no part of it. You know what He says? If you won't give me the worst of you to cleanse, I can't do anything even with the best of you. And so this kinsman redeemer says, I'll take the entire debt. I'll take everything. Good, bad, and ugly. It's all mine, and I'll pay for it. What a beautiful story of redemption. And then God provides for her. Now, we have this journey that's come full circle. She's back. And it says, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he had made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer, a kinsman redeemer. May he be famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. And the women living there said to Naomi, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. You remember David, right? The great king, the man after God's own heart. Once again, we have this story how God takes a foreign woman who's broken, whose life is bitter, and He redeems her from that brokenness, and He gives her a family. He says, not only am I going to save you from everything that was broken, but I'm going to give you a family. Not just any family. I'm going to make you a part of what will end up being the royal family. Not just the royal family. Because if we stop at David, it's pretty cool, but then there's Solomon, and the lineage goes on, and follow it all the way into the book of Matthew, and you will read that from that lineage comes the Savior of the world, the ultimate kinsman redeemer, Jesus Christ. I will make you a part of a family. Let me say this, and I told you there's a lot in this passage. What an awesome gift it is that when God saves us, He does not leave us on an island, but He makes us a family. He says, I'm going to give you the church, and in the church I'm going to give you brothers and sisters to fellowship with, to love. And I'm going to make you not just a family, I'm going to make you a royal family. I'm going to make you a holy family. I'm going to make you a precious family. And you will belong to me. See, that's where we come to our story, to God's story, all the way forward in the book of Galatians. And I want you to catch this first line because it's essentially important. Because God's timing is always the right time. And we have to trust that. Because sometimes in our bitter season, we think God should move quicker. But He says, but when the set time had fully come, God sent His Son, born of a woman under the law. That makes Him your close kin. He wasn't just a God that came to fix it. He was a human being just like you and I. He was born out of the same DNA structure that we're born out of. Why? To redeem those under the law, that they might receive adoption and sonship, to make us a family. Because you are His sons. God sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. Since you are His child, God has also made you an heir. He says God had planned from the very beginning to redeem you, to take everything that was broken in your life and everything that was wrong and all your debt and pay for it. To cover you in His blood and to give you life and life to the full and a family that you will belong to for an eternity. You are not a slave, you are a son. What a beautiful story we read, the story of Ruth, and how beautiful it fits into our life today. As we recognize we have a kinsman redeemer. So let me ask you just a few questions this morning. Where are you at? Are you running from God? Are you in a season where you say, you know what, I know that God has something for me? I know that God cares, but life's just too hard. I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to go to where it's easier. I'm going to do what is more comfortable for me. I'm going to pursue my own desires. I'm just not ready to trust Him. Are you in a bitter place? Have your decisions and the consequences that came from them, and possibly someone else's decisions, put you in a place where you're bitter? Life didn't go the way you planned. In fact, you had an idea that had you somewhere far away from where you are now. And life just seems hard. Are you in that place? Let me tell you what, it wasn't God's desire that you be in a bitter place. It's God's desire that you come to the foot of the cross. And at the foot of the cross, you recognize your kinsman redeemer. And you quietly and humbly call out, cover me. Cover me in your blood. Cover me in your love. Bring me under your wing. I submit to your authority. I yield to your leadership. You are the one true God. I surrender. Can you come there today? Can you find that place and surrender? Or will you choose to remain bitter? Will you choose to run? God has so much for you. You simply have to choose it. She made two big decisions. I'll pursue God. I'll trust my kinsman redeemer. You need to make both today. Will you pursue the Lord with all your heart, with all your might, with all your strength? And will you yield to your kinsman redeemer as Lord and Savior? You decide while we stand and while we say.
Hymn number 489. Statement in Ruth chapter 1 verse 16 just a little bit. Are you at a point in your life that you can honestly say, Lord, where you go, I'll go. I'll follow you. Lord, where you tell me to stay, I'll stay. Your church now will become my family. And you will be my God. Are you at that point in your life? And if you're not, what do we need to do to help you get there?